loves. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. Welcome back if you are a subscriber, and welcome. My name is Dee if you're new, and I'm so grateful that you're here. This is the weekly astrology report that, man, wow. I feel like I say that all the time, but we are in some really outrageous times right now, and the thing that I love among many things about astrology is that there is a consistency of rhythm and uh, and movement that comes along with the cycle of time. And even though everything in our lives may be coming to a grinding halt in some ways, the the laws of nature certainly have not, and that is something definitely worth keeping in mind as we are embarking on this momentous time that we're in. So we're going to talk about this weekend. Yesterday, we'll do a recap of yesterday. We have our first quarter square between the sun and the moon. That's on Wednesday, April 1st, with the sun in Aries and a moon in Cancer. We have Mars moving into Aquarius, conjuncting Saturn in the first degree of Aquarius. Whew, boy. And really the pinnacle. Oh, also Venus moves into Gemini. This is going to be the Gemini Sagittarius axis is going to be a big theme coming up into late spring and throughout the summer and even into next year. So Venus coming into Gemini. Now we're going to start to get a sense of what that really feels like, how to harmonize with that Gemini energy, how to find a way to feel good and develop and cultivate a loving relationship with the idea of duality and polarity. We'll get into that. Mercury conjuncts Neptune in Pisces, and today is, I believe, the last day that Mercury's in shadow. So after today, Mercury will be moving beyond the shadow, which means the point at which Mercury went retrograde not that long ago. And so Mercury is at the same degree in which it went retrograde right now. So after today, it'll be moving forward into new territory. But the real big piece, I think, of this week, and why it's really important to get this information leading up to this week and how we harness it, is that Jupiter is going to conjunct Pluto. It's going to meet up with Pluto in Capricorn on Saturday the 4th, and there's a global call to meditation on those days that has been shared from various sites all over the internet, and it's to anchor in the ascension timeline. Not that it's not here, but to really, this is a really important moment about how we do respond, impacting the way that this timeline and experience plays out. And we have agency and sovereignty and empowerment around that with how we direct ourselves internally, and then connecting with each other through an open heart space. And that's gonna, we do get to direct how our lives look as a result of our internal manifestation and the resonance of us. And so on the 4th and the 5th, to coincide with Jupiter meeting Pluto, which is in itself a really big transit that's going to open it's going to be a big opportunity at that moment. And so being in a place where we can direct very intentionally this outcome is going to be really supported with what's going on astrologically. In the same day too, Venus in the first degree Gemini is going to then trine Saturn in Gemini. So also bringing in, there's this, we're looking with Aquarius and Gemini specifically, the first degrees, 0 to first degrees of these air signs. So this swords energy. And a friend of mine had done a reading yesterday, and I'll link her page in the description box because you just definitely should check out what she's doing too. Made this reference to the Ace of Swords, pulled it in the reading, and it was just, talking about the beginning of this, a new seed of ideas coming in, but then also this really beautiful imagery about the sword and where it comes from in terms of an archetype, an energetic and even spiritual archetype, relating it to Excalibur and things like that. It's really quite beautiful. But there is this Ace of Swords energy that's been coming out in other readings as well. This new way of thinking, this new mindset, this new potential in terms of a mental construct coming through. And with Saturn in Aquarius, which happened right at the equinox, which was that was like when everything just like clicked into place finally, was on that equinox. And then Saturn moves into the first degree of Aquarius. This new mental energy, this new perspective is coming through. And so we'll talk about the first degree of Aquarius as well, because this is where Mars will conjunct with Saturn at this degree. And since we are moving into the age of Aquarius, this is pretty substantial. Now, in terms of the imagery for this whole time frame, has really seemed to me, there's a couple different images that I've used, but one of them has been, the moment where the force of gravity, like you throw an object up into the air and it reaches terminal velocity, and then the moment when the force of gravity outweighs literally the force of the object with its velocity. And there's this sweet spot, which is like the top of the arc, so to speak, where it's weightless and then it has nowhere to come but down. It's kind of like the top of the roller coaster, that moment of potential energy before it's all released and comes down. But what I'm really been feeling is this wave for a really long time, like this wave that's coming. And we're at this point now where if you're standing on a beach and there's a tsunami that's going to develop and come, this is the moment where you watch the water all contracting back, like the water receding all of a sudden really far back, something beyond just like the normal tides. You just watch because this is the gathering of the energy, the potential energies. It's like when you're climbing the hill on the roller coaster, you're building potential energy by going further up and further up, because you're working with the force of gravity ultimately, but then the wave is retracting. So if you know what that is, you're going to higher ground right now. And then you could take that literally, you could take that symbolically. Right now is going to a higher ground. There's many of us that have paddled out to this wave a long time ago, and we're going to ride it in. And but if you don't know what that is and you're just standing on the beach, you'll be going, I wonder what that is, why the water's all pulling back. This is you're going to be in for a rude awakening. And I think many people have at least gotten to the point where they're looking around and watching other people run for higher ground and being like, maybe something really big is about to happen, and I should do something, embrace myself, or be prepared to surrender to a process I have no control over at this point. Nobody's controlling a tsunami. That is not something you can control. You just have to surrender to it at this point. So this is where we're at. And so by the time the fourth rolls around, to have our intention be in the place of like the highest resonance, the highest good, the highest calling for our planet is going to be really important, because we still always have a choice. And this is what the week is going to put people consistently into a position where they are having to make some sort of choice, even if it's a decision to feel a certain way, a different way about something. So we'll go into the charts for specific days, talk about the alignments, talk about some Sabian symbols, and really just get the week laid out for you, so that if the channels of communication end up getting very narrow and it's harder to disseminate so much information, at the very least you have this idea astrologically of what's coming and what it can represent to you as we move forward. So today's the 29th. We're going to look at the chart for the 28th, which was yesterday. Now, that's not a chart. Let's see here. That's a chart. Okay, so we have let's see, our usual lineup of the nodes in Cancer and Capricorn. We have the Capricorn lineup here. Mars, this was yesterday, was at the 28 degrees of Capricorn. You see Jupiter coming closer to Pluto. Saturn is now in Aquarius. Mercury, 11 degrees. Neptune is at the same degree as the sun, as the last full moon that we had, which was in Virgo before the pandemic really started to take hold in the US in terms of something we have to care about. And let's be real, like there was a lot of people that were just like, nah, I got this whole boy that cried wolf vibe, because there's been so many other potential health scares that were managed very quickly and were able to be kept from this scale, even though they might have been more dangerous. I think a lot of people just didn't take it seriously when we probably could have. And now that's, we're dealing with that right now. Let's see, and the sun has moved past Chiron, is approaching Black Moon Lilith in Aries as well. And Uranus is right on the cusp of changing degrees. We'll talk a little bit about that since it's happening today. And then, yeah, the moon is conjunct with Venus. So let's start there. Now, there's been I've seen a lot of information about the Venus and Jupiter conjunction, or trine, that happened the day before on the 27th. But really, I think the real headliner here is the fact that we have Venus and the moon lined up with each other, pretty much trine exactly Pluto, probably within a couple minutes of a degree. So we're climbing up on the Pleiades here, just a couple of degrees away from where the Pleiades star cluster is in relation to Earth, which is in the end of Taurus. So the moon and Venus, both feminine signs, the moon being the priestess and Venus being the empress, the material incarnation of the feminine archetype, being in these signs that they're both either at home in or in their exaltation. And so they're very happy. This is a degree that, well, we'll get into that, because and in having trine into Pluto in Capricorn. So who's Pluto? The Lord of Death. Pluto gets down to the bottom of every nook and cranny of your soul, gets to the essence of all of what does it all boil down to in life is the mortality, the dynamic between life and death, the ultimate polarity in terms of being an embodied spirit or a soul on Earth. Is life as we know it in this physical universe. Is the cycle that is inherent in everything. There is creation and destruction. It's a cycle. And this is, with Pluto specifically too, when it comes to more of an esoteric and applied to the individual consciousness. I mean, it is getting down to the depth of who you are, and also the depth of, your relationship to everything around you as well. And this is where your power comes from. And so there's a lot of, there is a lot of power here. There's a lot of ability to excavate like the deepest things that you didn't even know were there. That's what Pluto does. And Pluto also just really simply is coming through and destroying in order to mulch up the fertilizer for the next cycle. That's what Pluto's been doing in Capricorn since 2008. Just a slow burn about these structures that are externalized, where we get our external power. That's the Capricorn archetype, is about external power, material creation. It's very connected to the business aspect, institutions, cultural institutions, financial institutions, government, political institutions. It's about power, but externalized power based in the ability to create something in reality in a very material way. And Pluto, so we have these two feminine signs connecting with each other in this feminine earth sign. All the earth's element associated with the signs, they all have the feminine archetype associated with it. So this deep aspect, and it's a trine doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. It just means that the energy is completely supported. And Pluto is just wreaking havoc on old reliance on traditions. That's what this degree in Capricorn is essentially is, reliance on our cultural traditions for safety and security and even refinement, like these really nice things that we've developed, not even nice, these beautiful aspects of our culture that have developed that are part of the tradition. Pluto is at this degree is just tearing it down, you know, the externalized reliance on what has worked for, you know, a long time. And I've been listening to all kinds of stuff, and I'm sure most people are too. They're listening to podcasts and videos, and you know, we haven't. And I was just listening to, God, it was Duncan Trussell was on Joe Rogan, and I really enjoyed their conversation quite a bit. And one of the things that, you know, they both kind of brought up separately and agreed upon is that, like, you know, there's just no, this is like one of the biggest things that globally we've had to deal with in a really long time. And so it's just pulling the rug out literally from under us. And if you look at the Sabian symbol for 25 degrees, it is precious oriental rugs. So it is, you know, Pluto pulling the rug out from under us and being like, so where do you really think your power is? Where do you think your security? I'm just going to take away all of these things that you think are where you're safe and secure, so that you have to like get down to the deepest roots of where that actually is. So this is very much in a supportive role with this conjunction with Venus and the moon. And this was yesterday. I mean, it was not an easy day yesterday. Absolutely not. I mean, on a personal level, if you don't already know, like I posted on my Catalyst Energies Facebook page. I did a very raw video about finding out that morning that my uncle and godfather had passed away as a direct result of contracting COVID-19 and then the complications that came with it. And this is, you know, something that's going to get processed over time. So it's not like was that, you know, these signs and these planets are very happy in Taurus, and it is this receptive, sacred, feminine aspect about deep love, and like a surrender to the internal intuitive aspects of who we are, and receiving. It's about receiving and being receptive instead of giving and doing. And that was, we definitely received something yesterday, and in some way that was very, very heavy, and at the same time a fucking gift, absolutely a gift. And I also believe that, as you know, this is kind of a gateway, especially with Pluto involved, that people exiting were, you know, fulfilling their mission and going home. And wow, it's intense. And so this is an intense thing. And I think this yesterday was like a big moment of accepting and receiving this gift of total, like, stripped down, you know, stripped down of what's important to you, stripped down of what you're relying on for your safety and security. And, you know, and then you have these two elements in Taurus, and the Sabian symbol for this is so nice, and it's so interesting that they're connected with the Pluto, because it's a vast public park, the cultivation of natural energies for collective use and recreation. So when we're talking about the moon, we're talking about us internally, what we're feeling. And when we're talking about Venus, we're talking about what we love, what makes us, you know, what allows us to harmonize with the world around us, you know, what is it that gives us that tingle, makes our hair stand on end in a good way. If you've ever listened to a piece of music that is just like speaking to you, this happened to me all the time when I was playing music, especially if you play music or you sing, it happens a lot, where you hit this moment that everything is just like resonating, and all the hair on the back of your neck stands up in this wonderful, ecstatic way. I miss that, because I don't play as much music as I used to. I mean, that was my life for a long time, was being like a student and professional musician. So the cultivation of natural energies for collective use and recreation. So it's about collective enjoyment. The individual finds in the products of their culture an emotional enhancement born of the feeling of belonging to a large, organized, peaceful whole. And so these moments of having the rug pulled out from under us in some way, something we cannot control, that just like digs into the deepest part of ourselves, really was a supportive moment when these two came together to emotionally and in a very real and harmonious way find a sense of belonging, because it's these grief and these situations that do pull us together and encourage us to find that collective enjoyment with each other. And it's not really enjoyment when you're grieving somebody that you've lost very suddenly in a way that can really evoke a lot of fear and anger specifically. But it's also the you do have, there is something collective there to come to, there's something collective for you to connect with, and it's and you do feel like you belong to a whole of humanity, and we belong to the earth. I mean, that's been a big one, especially when you're talking about Venus in Taurus and then the moon in Taurus. It's very much a deep connection to the earth too, and that she is holding us. There's so much support for what's happening right now. So that was the big news for yesterday. And then the moon goes into Gemini soon after. And the moon Gemini time, this is a great time to start linking in even more to our intuition, because Gemini is an interesting sign and it is going to be on the forefront for a while. And we better start getting familiar with it, because it is the idea that is the first moment of consciousness of, and that consciousness, that first moment of consciousness comes from the opposition and the tension that is created through polarity. You don't, oh man, if you haven't listened to Matt Kahn's recent video that he uploaded on YouTube, he had some gravitas to him in that video. And that was one of the things he brought up too, that I've been talking about for a long time, because I know the nodes are going into Gemini and Sag, and just the concept of polarization being the foundation for creation. And so rather than resisting it, accepting it, so that we can create something new. But he talked about that too, about how look at how polarizing the situations in our world are, and they have been for a couple of years now, and look at how that has created the potential for real change. And I'm totally 100% in agreement with that. So with the moon, especially in the next couple of days being in Gemini, we're going to get an emotional aspect of that, of what it feels like to have having polarization, knowing that they are one and the same, because that's going to be something else to really think about, is that living in 3D is this, is the moment of separation from unity. So it's the experience of it is where the creation comes from, because of that, because it's there. So it's one and the same. And that's really Gemini. That's why that's the first spring of consciousness. And the moon also yesterday trined Mars in late Capricorn, late Taurus. So almost like sanctioning in some ways. Mars is up leveling to Aquarius, which is about to happen. So, and then we move on to today, and today it's more of the moon in Gemini. There's a sextile with Chiron and the sun, both in early Aries. And I really feel like that, again, that tsunami aspect and the ego specifically, because we're talking about early Gemini as well, which is the idea of becoming aware of polarization in the mind, and being curious almost, and being willing to accept multiple points of view at one time, because you understand that that's where that's thesis and antithesis is where new dissertations come from. You know what I mean? Synthesizing, that's the Sagittarian aspect, is the belief that comes from that understanding. But right now we're just allowing new ideas to come in. So the moon sextile Chiron, sextile Aries, sun in Aries. Aries is the ego consciousness, because it's all potential, it's all creative potential, but it's still very much about the I, because we haven't even gotten to a point where we can recognize that there is an other. That's Taurus is the other, the environment around us. So the moon, these sextiles from Chiron and the Sun in Aries is really going to be a choice point about how we identify the the uh, the reality of polarity and what it means. Because if we have, um, if we're in a place of potential with Aries, and we see we see the potential, we feel the potential, we understand our very nature of being here, and value ourselves and understand our worth of just existing, then this will certainly, the sextile needs to be activated in some way. It needs attention. And so if we use that as like, knowing your self-worth is here just by virtue of existing, then that's going to allow you to be able to see polarity without being pulled into polarity, if that makes sense. Now, if we're still stuck in ego in some way, fear and anger, and that's the aspect of Aries that we're getting from the Sun and Chiron, then the way that moon in Gemini gets activated is that we are, we get pulled into the duality itself. We're steeped in it, we're immersed in it, we can't see outside of it, we just see black and white all the time, and it produces anxiety. Our nervous system is always on. So it really depends on how we see, where is our self-worth situated, and have we reconciled where Chiron is, and will be for the next 6 years, because it's going to be in Aries for a while. So this is going to be a conversation that we keep having. So today, is like one of those days. Which way are you going to go? Are you going to stand there and watch the water recede, being like, oh, I wonder, or being more worried about not being able to control it? Or are you going to start going to higher ground? That's the question for today. And so Monday is when Mars moves into Aquarius. Still have a moon in Gemini. And then Tuesday is when Mars conjuncts with Saturn at that first degree, 0 to 1 degree, so 1 degree Aquarius for the Sabian symbol. And Wednesday is our first quarter square. So let's see if I can find that one. There we go. April 1st. So yeah, Mars now has moved into, at this point, has moved into Aquarius, has just passed Saturn. And I feel like that once Mars hits Saturn and starts to move forward, that's when the arc starts to go down. That's when the wave it has already pulled all the way back. It's like a slingshot almost. You know what I mean? It's the top of the roller coaster. There's no going back from that. And that's Tuesday. So we have some time now to really get ourselves situated, because the Aquarius is the mind. And it's about building. That first degree of Aquarius is about building something that is going to last well beyond us. It's an idealized version of society. It is something bigger than just you or me and what we want. And the Sabian symbol, an old adobe mission in California, the power inherent in all great human works to endure far beyond the workers' lifespans. The symbol speaks of the projection of a noble ideal into concrete forms of beauty and significance. This is when it gets put into place, how we're going to address what's happening. And so we have some time to really get with ourselves. And my reading this morning that I posted I did a live intuitive reading that's on Facebook, and that it's very much about that. And the ego is definitely going to go out the window, because Aquarius is like the collective third eye. It's not about ego or fear or materialism. It's about like an idealized form of society that is very futuristic and innovative and takes care of the whole group. And once Mars gets there and passes Saturn, it's on. And that's on Tuesday. And so Wednesday is the first quarter square, and we're going to feel that crisis in action. The first quarter is the crisis in action. It's the first moment after the new moon, where the moon squares the sun, and we have we were just like, all right, we had these intentions, and now we have our first roadblock. That's just like, okay, so what are we going to do to fix this situation so that we can make sure that our seeds come to fruition? So in this case, we have the moon will be in Cancer, is already past the North Node, and then it's going to be square to right here, Sun in Aries, who is 12 degrees, 9 minutes of Aries and Cancer. And I want to read these too because they are just significant. And so what are we talking about? We're talking about a sun in Aries, the ego consciousness, the very basic seed point of our personality, and Cancer, which is the home sign of the moon and is also about personal power. This is where the North Node has been now for just about 18 months, showing us where we're rooting into the earth. And so this, especially with the moon, this is where we're going to feel it emotionally and very personally, this this opportunity to ground right down into the core of the earth, because Cancer is the fourth house, and the fourth house is the cusp of the fourth house is the nadir, which is right here. If you look, it's not shown on this chart in terms of like its divisions, but it's right here. This is the nadir. This is the root system into the earth. Where is your root system? This is where your personal power comes from, the earth, not the externalized things that humans build. It's about the the nurturing process of nature and our root system. So this is where the square is going to be, because the Aries, let's see here, 13 degrees of Aries is an unexploded, oh my God, unexploded bomb reveals an unsuccessful social protest. An immature evaluation of the possibility of transforming suddenly the status quo. This is where it's going to heat up, guys. Seriously, people are going to start being really, they're already angry, and there's going to be, people are going to want to demand a revolution now. They're demanding action. They're getting built up. And again, Matt Kahn really, wow, he was just so on point. And it usually is, but wow, like with the astrology, it's like, whew, in terms of timing, it's going to be, there's going to be too much of a push potentially. And the square comes, and that's out in the sun, that's illuminating, that's like our outward directed consciousness collectively, where the sun is. And so with the moon, we're really internally, emotionally going to be feeling a pull inward, though, to like take care, to not express this frustration immaturely, because we have not dealt with, because we're still connected to the ego consciousness of Aries. By the time we get to the Cancer energy, it's really about finding our empowerment from within, because we've gotten to a point now where we are finding our root system and not just acting out of the ego consciousness that is the seed point of Aries. Let's find 13 of Cancer. I mean, I already read these. A hand with a prominent thumb is held out for study. The power of the will in shaping character. That's, yeah. Whenever this symbol confronts a person or a situation, it is shown that a strong will is required to face the issue or task. Oh, we're really going to be put to the test this week. Absolutely. Are we going to develop that will? Are we going to ground down, anchor into the earth, into our character, building our character as a person? Or are we going to, that's the challenge. The sun is, illuminating this like frustration, this adolescent frustration, like, and it was like, it's like when I did a lot of activism when I was in my 20s. And I had, especially in university, I was certainly on the front line in terms of certain organizations and actions. I was directly involved in having the mascot of my university taken out. We were the Indians, and I was definitely a big part of that changing, among other people, obviously. But just to give you a context, like I understand where that energy comes from, and it does propel us forward in some ways, but this is really suggesting that it hasn't really fully developed in maturity yet. It's still more of like a frustration, and we could really feel a push, and some people could be pushing us in some ways to do something or to act out of anger, as opposed to taking the chance at this point to ground down, to anchor down into our character, into our own personal power. This is where we're really going to feel it. Especially once Mars had conjunct with Saturn in the first degree of Aquarius, that point of no return, and then we're gonna feel the tension with that decision. Absolutely. And then we move on to this is the square here, right? What else is happening that day? The moon is going to trine, which is really nice, is going to trine Mercury and Neptune in Pisces. And Mercury is getting closer to Pisces now, or Neptune in Pisces now. And this is going to at least draw us to see that there is so much more happening. The table is set for us at the end of this this whole situation. We are just on our way, and this is really gonna, the moon in Cancer is really gonna be supported by these, you know, this powerful spiritual like mission, especially with Neptune and Pisces. Like it's really about the collective from a very deep and divine collective consciousness type of way. So that's Wednesday. So Thursday, a lot of moon stuff. The moon will move into Leo on Thursday. Friday is when when Venus moves into Gemini, and then we not only with the moon in Gemini, we got a chance to internalize this polarity that exists and to feel it in its fullness without surrendering to it, you know, getting pulled into the duality so that we're just only seeing the one or the other. It's a powerless place to be. It's like being a ping pong ball back and forth. And then so Venus will move into Gemini, then stimulating, well, how do we harmonize with this? How do we find deep love with this? How do we find relationship with this? You know, and then Mercury will then meet up with Neptune, and we will probably get some pretty big realizations and downloads potentially about, like, you know, some confirmation that the table is set for us, and that this situation is on its way to the best outcome possible. This is on Friday. So Saturday is the day that Jupiter conjunct with Pluto. At the same time that, let's see, Venus is trine with Saturn. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, look at that chart. The moon just kind of stretching everything over everywhere. Oh my God, it's almost like oh wow. You can kind of see like a three-dimensional pyramid shape right here. I don't know as much about the geometry in itself, you know, all the shapes yet. That's still stuff that I'm learning, but I can look at it and see the dynamic that's happening, that's for sure, and how everything is like pulled over to this moon, and this really, it feels very balanced in some ways, and then you have all this imbalance over here. So Jupiter and Pluto, what does Jupiter do? Expands on everything. We already talked about what Pluto does. Again, the rug pulled out from under us, absolutely. And then Jupiter at the same time expanding on that, totally expanding on that, just making it way bigger. And so at that point, we get to infuse that space that's been created by Jupiter, expanding, you know, the container in some ways. We can infuse that space. We can impact that space with our own resonance when we do this global meditation that's happening on the 4th into the 5th. This is going to be, and then the moon will be in Virgo at the same time, which is where the full moon was. It won't be at the same degree. It will be the next day, I'm pretty sure. But it's more about, it almost comes full circle in some ways to have the moon come back around to Virgo again. And so we get to revisit, we've revisited everything since that big full moon where this really kicked off in the US for sure. Now, what I want to, let's see here. The sun is coming pretty close to Black Moon Lilith, who's now retrograde. So she's moving backwards in Aries. Now, Uranus has moved into the next degree, which is so much nicer than where it's been sitting, which is the widow at the open grave. I mean, wow, that has been pretty substantially shown to be accurate as far as I'm concerned. But now has moved into this next degree, which is a bridge across the gorge. It's connecting. It's connection. It's connecting these two opposing things, which are the one end of the gorge and the other end of the gorge. I mean, so there is so much potential hope and ability to see how we're gonna like manage this in a way that is for everybody. But leading up to it this week is going to really put us in a position of testing that, especially with the first quarter square, big time. And I think when Venus moves into Gemini, it's going to be really an opportunity to really learn how to love the fact that this is happening. And I'm not saying that you have to like it or even love it, but embrace it, because you can't do anything about it. And you can't, especially can't do anything about it immersed in duality. You have to have this perspective of understanding that duality is there in order for creation to happen, and not be pulled into the aspect of duality, which translates to essentially not getting pulled back into the 3D experience. We want to be in the 4 and 5D experience of it. So the one thing I want to bring up, and I just don't know enough about it, I've done a little bit of research, but if you happen to have been alive and aware in the very early 80s, this was the last, so this is the chart for November 1st, 1981. I was 3 years old. So I can't really comment on what the state of the world felt like, but look at this chart. Doesn't it look similar to what's going on now in terms of the way everything is all kind of clumped together for the most part? This is the last time that Jupiter and Pluto conjuncted. It's in Libra, and it's exactly square to the degree of where Jupiter and Pluto are now. So this happened at 24 to 25 degrees of Libra, which is square to Capricorn. Libra is the sign, it's an air sign. It is about the scales of justice. It is about equanimity and fairness and balance in material reality, symmetry. Libra is ruled by Venus. So it's about things being fair and balanced and symmetrical. You know, sacred geometry, I feel like, is a part of a Libra thing, because it's in the mind and it's in something that you perceive mentally with geometry. So this is the last time that, and you can see it's the same lineup of Saturn, not ahead now, but is in the same sign, also in Libra. Mercury is in Libra. The sun is now in Scorpio, so just had passed everything right before this conjunction. Uranus is at the last degree of Scorpio, which is like the trickster degree. Oh, wow. Venus is at the galactic center in 26 to 27 degrees Sagittarius. And look, these are the nodes. The south node is in Capricorn. The north node is in Cancer. And where are they? They're pretty much conjunct where Jupiter and Pluto are lining up now in these degrees, right? Pretty much conjunct. So I did a little bit of research, not a ton. I would love if anybody was actually alive and if there's anybody who is older who would identify as a baby boomer, because they would have a really good sense of the climate politically, economically. I mean, we're talking about the Cold War, obviously, the space race in a way. And there was, political things happening. So I feel like that, especially with the way these things are lining up in terms of like the nodes also being Capricorn and Cancer at that time, but conjunct where Jupiter and Pluto are now at that degree, and then having all of this like Libra lineup, there's a cycle coming back around, which is about a 39-year cycle, close to 40-year cycle, which I think is just interesting. I just haven't done enough research, but this is the last time that Jupiter and Pluto were conjunct, and it was, like I said, exactly square. So it was in Libra, and that means that it was the Pluto and Libra generation, which is what I'm part of, which is Gen X and before, which is going to come up in the next full moon, because the next full moon is going to be at 19 degrees of Libra. So again, we'll come back around and kind of have a connection to this Mercury and Saturn in Libra that was there when Jupiter and Pluto conjuncted in Libra in 1981. And it was just a really, that was, you know, like I said, that's the Cold War time. Ronald Reagan was president. There's a lot going on here that I would love to dig into more. And if anybody has any feedback about what was going on during that time, or a much better way to search for news articles, I'm not coming up with a ton. I'd love to dig deeper because I think that this is very much connected to what's happening now, because it's all about the cycles. All right. I think that's it for now. I think the daily will be on my blog. That'll be in the description box below, and that covers more of like the energy of the day as we move through, because this is not a prediction tool. This is just showing us where the potential is in any given moment to make a choice on how to harness the symbolic and archetypal relationships that are happening with everything. So this is critical week, peoples, and yeah, we're about to hit a point of really no return, and you have to really ask yourself, are you going to engage in your adolescent frustration because you can't control the situation and possibly flare up around that when it's not ready? Or are you going to allow the moon to draw you in and bring you down into your personal power and character? Because this is really where the real work's going to come in. And then on the 4th into the 5th, Jupiter conjuncts with Pluto, creating an incredible amount of space where Pluto has been digging down into the very depths of our soul collectively, and we can choose to connect our resonance with that space and fill that space with a resonance of love and bliss and compassion and equanimity and, you know, all the utopic things that we want out of our world and that most people want. And that's what this situation is all about. So I'm going to leave it at that. Anything you need is in the description box below in terms of information, contact information, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. I'm posting daily on astrology and intuitive readings. Have a series about being a starseed and lightworker who also is currently ill. I have had symptoms for about a week, and I've been logging that and using that as also as an opportunity to share some deeper insights about what this, how we can best navigate this current environment, and also to be a real person that identifies as a lightworker, starseed. Having a very high vibration, but also still having a foot in 3D, which means that you're, you know, have the potential to be impacted by what's happening here, and how those two things can exist at the same time, and what that feels like, what my experience of that is, and hopefully that gives people a sense of their own validation and empowerment to move through this time together, because we all have to do this together. Thank you for being here. Thank you for holding space for me. I hope this information is helpful. I'm very close to taking one-on-one clients back for readings, especially astrological readings. I might not be able to do energy work still for a while, but I might be starting to take astrology clients on a donation basis, because I think it's really important that people get tuned in to what their mission is right now, or at least get an idea. What ends up happening is the astrology tends to validate what people have already started to feel intuitively or internally, and it allows you to start trusting your own intuition when you have this validation from this tool, this modality. Same thing with the tarot, the Kabbalah, the I Ching. These are all archetypal tools that allow us to tap into what we already know. And so that's why I really enjoy and see real benefit in people reporting real lasting benefit by understanding their chart. So and keep an eye out for I'm going to offer some courses soon on certain things that will be free of charge and available right now, because we just need to be sharing what we have with each other and taking care of each other. So I'm going to save my voice, and I'm going to stop this video and tell you that I love you and that I will see you on the next video.